What I am about to share with you does not just challenge your understanding of survival, it obliterates the very foundation of what we believe drives human beings to stay alive. Imagine, for just a second, it's an average winter night in 1978. 5 men pile into a car with one simple plan: drive to Chico, California, watch their favorite college basketball team play. 10. Head-home standard stuff. The kind of evening that happens in 1,000 small towns across America every single weekend. Unremarkable, safe, routine. Except they never came back. And when investigators finally unraveled what happened to them, the evidence didn't just fail to provide answers. It systematically destroyed every rational framework law enforcement tried to apply. We standing at the edge of something that should unexist in a world governed by logic and Northern California, February 1978. What starts as a straightforward missing persons report quickly mutates into something investigators couldn't categorize. This was not your typical case of getting disoriented on a hiking trail or a vehicle breakdown in harsh weather. What unfolded was a chain of choices, deliberate, purposeful choices that violated every principle of human survival psychology. Seasoned detectives, people who'd seen decades of bizarre human behavior, found themselves completely unable to construct a narrative that made any sense. The timeline haunts everyone who touches this file. The men attended the game. Multiple witnesses confirmed this. They were seen leaving the arena. Their car was later discovered on a remote mountain road. And then, silence. A void, as if they stepped through some invisible threshold and ceased to exist in any recognizable reality. But here's where your brain starts rejecting what I'm telling you. Months later, when search teams finally recovered the bodies, the circumstances surrounding their deaths defied medical and psychological explanation. Some died from hypothermia. You'd expect that in freezing mountain conditions, right? Standard exposure, death. Tragic but comprehensible, except others starved to death. Now, before you rationalize this with "they ran out of food," let me stop you right there. They were found surrounded by provisions, canned goods, dried foods, calories literally within arm's reach. Yet they didn't eat. One victim was discovered in a trailer, stocked with enough supplies to keep a person alive for months. He had access to everything he needed: warmth, shelter, sustenance, and he died of starvation anyway. One of the 5 men was never found at all. Completely vanished, as though the mountain consumed him and refused to give back even bones. Ask yourself this: what could possibly make 5 grown adults abandon a perfectly functioning vehicle in the middle of nowhere and deliberately walk into wilderness that would kill them? This is the detail that keeps investigators awake decades later. Their car wasn't broken down. The engine ran fine, plenty of gas in the tank, no flat tires, no mechanical issues whatsoever. The doors were left hanging open, keys still accessible, as if they'd stepped out to check something and planned to return in 60 seconds. But they never did. Instead, they marched into terrain that offered nothing but death. And this is where the case stops behaving like a tragedy and starts behaving like something else entirely. The distance they traveled matters enormously here. We're not talking about wandering a couple hundred feet off the main road in confusion. These men covered miles, significant, exhausting miles into areas they had zero reason to enter. No hiking trails pointed that direction. No campgrounds, no cabins they knew about. No scenic overlooks, nothing that would draw a person deeper into increasingly hostile wilderness. Yet something compelled them to keep moving, step after step, away from the only lifeline they had. When humans face mortal danger from cold, our biology takes over with programming refined across hundreds of thousands of years of evolution. We don't think about these responses, they just happen. Find shelter immediately. Conserve every ounce of energy. Stay together for shared body heat. They're automatic protocols that kick in whether you want them to or not. So when forensic investigators found evidence that systematically contradicted every single one of these hardwired survival responses, they weren't just looking at a mystery. They were staring at something that questioned our fundamental understanding of how the human mind operates under extreme stress. It's one thing to make a poor decision in a crisis. It's another thing entirely for multiple people to simultaneously make the worst possible decision, repeatedly, over an extended period. The comparisons to Russia's Dyatlov Pass incident aren't sensationalist clickbait, they're disturbingly legitimate. Different hemisphere, different era. Yet both cases feature experienced people making choices that defy not just common sense, but biological imperative. Both involve abandoning safety for exposure to lethal elements. Both suggest either mass psychological breakdown, some form of external coercion, or something neither of those categories can adequately contain. Soviet investigators hit walls, trying to explain the Ural Mountains deaths. American authorities encountered the same impenetrable barriers in the Sierra Nevada foothills. Both files remain open. Both generate theories ranging from tragic cascading errors to scenarios involving phenomena that exist outside our current scientific paradigm. And here's what makes this even more unsettling. Every conventional explanation crumbles under scrutiny. Paradoxical undressing caused by severe hypothermia. That's a real phenomenon where freezing victims feel suddenly hot and remove their clothing. But it doesn't account for the geographical distribution of the bodies, the timeline of events, or the fact that some victims were still partially clothed. Group panic disorder doesn't explain the directional consistency of their movement or why they didn't scatter randomly in terror. Carbon monoxide poisoning from a vehicle malfunction would have rendered them unconscious long before they could travel miles on foot. Foul play? Absolutely zero forensic evidence of violence, struggle, or third-party involvement. Every single traditional investigative pathway terminates in a dead end, leaving us holding puzzle pieces that refuse to connect no matter how you arrange them. The cabin or trailer, depending on which report you read, represents perhaps the most psychologically disturbing element of this entire nightmare. One of the men, against astronomical odds, located this remote structure. A got inside. Think about what that means. He'd found salvation. The door closed behind him, sealing out the killing cold. Food sat on shelves. Blankets offered warmth. A propane heater could have brought his core temperature back to survivable levels. He had found the one thing in miles of wilderness that could have saved his life. And what did he do with it? Nothing. He broke into a storage shed full of food, but barely ate any of it. He wrapped himself in sheets, but didn't attempt to start the heater. He was a man surrounded by the tools of survival who chose not to use them. His body was discovered months later, emaciated, having wasted away just feet from salvation. This isn't a story about getting lost in the woods. This is a story about something fundamentally breaking in the human mind. The Yuba County Five didn't just die. They participated in their own demise. In a way that defies all logic. The case remains a chilling testament to the fact that there are forces at play, whether internal or external, that we simply do not understand. And that, perhaps, is the most terrifying part of all. What do you think happened on that mountain? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Instead of doing any of the obvious things a rational person would do, evidence suggests he spent time arranging objects, opening containers without consuming their contents, and engaging in activities that had nothing to do with staying alive. He had won the survival lottery, found shelter that 99% of people in his situation would never locate, then somehow failed to use it. How does a human brain, even one severely compromised by cold and stress, completely bypass such clear opportunities for survival? The toxicology reports came back clean across the board. No drugs, no alcohol, no medications that would impair judgment, no chemical explanation for cognitive malfunction of this magnitude. These weren't college kids on a substance-fueled adventure making impaired decisions. These were adult men, some with developmental disabilities. Yes, but others fully capable of rational thought who collectively participated in a sequence of actions that reads less like a police report and more like the outline for a psychological horror film. If you were freezing, starving, and terrified in the dark, what would you do differently? That's not a rhetorical question. Really think about it, because the choices these men made seem to violate something deeper than logic. They violate instinct itself. Witness statements from that evening provide fragments without ever completing the picture. Multiple people saw them at the basketball game, appearing normal, behaving normally. They were observed leaving the arena. A few reports placed their vehicle heading up the mountain road. Then the evidentiary trail just stops. No credible sightings after that point. No encounters anyone can verify. 5 human beings simply vanished into landscape that would eventually surrender their remains while keeping their story locked away forever. Forensic analysis of the recovery sites raised more questions than it answered. The footprint patterns told a strange story. Initially, the tracks suggested the group moved together, maintaining cohesion. Then, at some point, they separated. What caused that fracture? What made them decide to split up in conditions where staying together represented their best chance of survival? And here's the detail that sends chills down the spine of every expert who examines this case. The footprint patterns didn't show panic. The stride lengths remained consistent. The direction stayed purposeful. The spacing between prints suggested deliberate movement toward a specific objective. These weren't the chaotic, erratic tracks of lost, desperate people stumbling randomly through the dark. These tracks indicated intention, purpose, as though they knew exactly where they were going. But going where? To what? No destination in that direction made any logical sense whatsoever. The timeline presents its own set of impossibilities. Based on when they disappeared and when the bodies were discovered, these men survived in absolutely brutal conditions for an extended period. Not a few hours. Not overnight. We're potentially talking days. Maybe even weeks in some cases. They endured, they persisted through cold that should have killed them much faster. Yet during this entire survival period, every decision they made seemed calculated to guarantee their deaths rather than prevent them. It's as if some fundamental aspect of rationality inverted. Every instinct that should have preserved life instead transformed into actions, ensuring death. That's not just bad judgment. That's something we don't have a framework to explain. Family members provided background that makes this even harder to comprehend. These men were described as creatures of routine. They thrived on predictability and familiar patterns. Spontaneity wasn't their thing. They stuck to what they knew. The notion that they would suddenly, without any apparent trigger, deviate from a known route, abandon their vehicle, and trek into completely unfamiliar wilderness contradicts everything their life history suggested about their behavior. Yet the physical evidence proves that's exactly what happened. Something interrupted their established pattern with enough force or persuasion to override years, maybe decades, of conditioned behavior. What possesses that kind of power? Decades have elapsed since that February night. Technology has advanced exponentially. Investigative methodologies have evolved in ways that would seem like science fiction to 1970s law enforcement. Cold case units now have tools and techniques that can extract information from evidence in ways previous generations never imagined. Yet this case remains firmly planted in law enforcement's unsolved mysteries category. Modern investigators, applying contemporary forensic science and psychological profiling to the old evidence, arrive at the same frustrating conclusion their predecessors did. The available data doesn't support any single coherent theory that accounts for all the facts. The puzzle remains unsolved not because we lack the pieces, but because the pieces seem to come from different puzzles entirely. And that's the truly terrifying part, not that we don't know what happened, but that what happened might not have an explanation that fits within our understanding of reality. So where does all this leave us? Suspended in liminal space between the knowable and the unknowable, forced to sit with the profoundly uncomfortable reality that not every mystery submits to rational inquiry. That despite our advanced forensics, our psychological models, our decades of accumulated investigative wisdom, some events remain stubbornly, maddeningly, impossibly unexplained. This isn't about pushing conspiracy theories or exploiting tragedy for entertainment value. This is about honest intellectual acknowledgement that our understanding of human behavior, survival, psychology, and even the nature of physical reality itself still contains significant gaps. Blind spots where conventional wisdom offers zero illumination. The Yuba County incident exists firmly within one of those gaps, a thoroughly documented case that defies every attempt at categorization and resists every effort at resolution. The official files remain open. The questions remain unanswered. And perhaps most unsettling of all, The experts who've spent careers examining this case will tell you, off the record, that they're not sure we'll ever know what really happened on that mountain. Some mysteries, it seems, are designed to stay mysteries. If this exploration into one of America's most deeply haunting unsolved cases has left you questioning every assumption you've ever made about human decision-making under crisis, then you're in exactly the right place. The archive mind exists specifically to navigate these uncomfortable territories, where certainty dissolves, and easy answers evaporate like morning fog. We don't deal in sensationalist garbage or cheap thrills designed to harvest clicks. What we bring you is meticulously researched, deeply investigated examination of cases that continue to baffle the experts who dedicate their lives to solving them. Hit that subscribe button right now if you're genuinely ready to challenge the comfortable narratives you've been told about what we think we know versus what we can actually prove. Because the Yuba County case, it represents just one entry in a much larger catalog of unexplained phenomena that deserves serious, unflinching examination. The next case we're recovering might disturb you even more than this one, and, given what you just heard, that's saying something significant. Don't miss what's coming next. This rabbit hole goes deeper than you imagine.